Hi, everyone. Welcome. Thanks so much for joining us today. We're going to just wait one more minute for some more folks to come in from the waiting room before we get started, but thanks for joining us. Hello, everyone, and good afternoon. Thanks so much for joining us today for this webinar, Creating a Sense of Belonging on the First Day of Class. My name is Samantha Levine. I am an Associate Director with the APLU Office of Urban Initiatives and the Coalition of Urban Serving Universities. I'm excited to be moderating this wonderful panel today as we launch the First Day Toolkit, an evidence-based approach to creating a growth mindset culture in the classroom on the first day of class. Joining me today are three leaders from our APLU and USU institutions who have been instrumental in helping us develop this toolkit. They are Dr. Laurel Hartley, Associate Professor in the Department of Integrative Biology at the University of Colorado, Denver, Dr. Sushila Naughtenbelt, Senior Lecturer and Director of the BA-MD program in the Department of Chemistry at the University of New Mexico, and Dr. Tiffany Mfume, Associate Vice President for Student Success and Retention at Oregon State University. I'm going to share just a little bit about the toolkit and how it was developed, and then we'll hear from our wonderful panel, all of whom have been using this tool on their own campuses. Please feel free to use the chat to say hello and let us know where you're joining us from today. We'll also have some time at the end of our discussion for Q&A. If you have questions for the panel, please use the Q&A function at the bottom of your Zoom screen to submit those questions. We're not going to be keeping an eye on the chat for questions, so please be sure to use that Q&A feature to make sure that we can see them on our end. The First Day Toolkit was developed through the Student Experience Project, a collaborative of university leaders, faculty, researchers, and national education organizations committed to addressing inequities in college success by improving the student experience. The institutions in the SCP cohort, as well as those in the Peer Learning Network, have been testing and implementing evidence-based practices to create more equitable learning environments, with capacity building support from the learning partners and financial support from the Rakes Foundation. Collectively, the project takes an approach to student success rooted in decades of research on belonging, growth mindset, identity safety, and other social psychological aspects of students' experiences in college. We're going to put a link in the chat with more information on these social psychology constructs for anyone who's interested in learning more. I will get that link in just one moment. What we know from this research is that when students face challenges in college, like struggling with difficult course material or feeling intimidated by professors, and they think it is not typical to experience these things, it is understandable that they could take this as a sign that they don't belong or can't succeed. Research shows that once students draw this conclusion, it can lead them to disengage academically and socially. If, however, students believe that it's typical to face challenges in college and they believe it's possible to overcome them, this leads to greater academic engagement and better academic outcomes. Environmental and interpersonal cues that signal belonging and potential for success deeply impact the way that students respond to these challenging moments, especially for students who have been structurally disadvantaged in their pursuit of higher education. These students are paying particular attention to signals from the institution, their professors, and other students as to whether they or people like them belong on campus and can succeed there. The SEP aims to disrupt this process by taking an institutional and structural approach. It aims to not locate the problem within students, but instead to seek changes in the learning environment that surround them by equipping faculty with strategies to convey their beliefs in students' potential to succeed and to foster a sense of belonging. This then helps students persist through challenges to succeed in the course. And I'm going to put a link in the chat with some of more research studies from the Student Experience Project for those who might want to do a deeper dive on that a little bit later. The first day of class is, of course, a key opportunity for instructors to set the tone for the learning environment. The First Day Toolkit helps instructors improve messages that students tend to receive on the first day of class. Much of this comes through the syllabus, but it also shows up in the way that instructors talk about course policies and expectations. The toolkit was developed in partnership with the institutions in the peer learning network and was later refined by the institutions in the SEP cohort. Nearly 300 instructors at 16 institutions from a wide array of disciplines were part of this process. They utilized evidence-based approaches created by the College Transition Collaborative to convey a growth mindset and foster a sense of belonging through their syllabi. 90% of instructors surveyed indicated that the toolkit helped them convey a growth mindset in their syllabus, and 93% of instructors surveyed would recommend the toolkit to a colleague. The toolkit contains a self-paced online learning module, which has videos, example syllabi, reflection questions, and a detailed revision guide designed to help instructors think about a variety of ways to establish a supportive learning environment through their syllabus. These recommendations are all low-lift opportunities to shift the ways that instructors communicate with students and establish course policies. It's not about entirely changing their course. The toolkit also includes recommendations for a few other core ways that faculty can support students on the first day of class, with step-by-step guides to help them implement these new practices. And you'll hear from our panelists in just a moment about what it was like to bring instructors together to share their revised syllabi with one another. The toolkit contains a workshop facilitation guide with some suggested prompts to get those conversations going. As part of the toolkit development process, we sought out feedback from students, asking them to assess whether the syllabi that were revised using the toolkit were an improvement over the original versions of those syllabi. We collected the original and revised syllabi from 37 instructors and asked students to assess two things: whether the syllabus made them feel supported and whether the syllabus was clear about course expectations and standards. The students perceived that the revised syllabi were both more supportive and more clearly communicated about course expectations than the original syllabi. Students reported that syllabi that were clearer about expectations did things like using the term drop-in hours instead of office hours, or making a note on the syllabus about how quickly students could expect to receive a response if they were to email the instructor, and encouraging students to follow up after that time period passes if they hadn't received a response. These may seem like small changes in the grand scheme of things, but they help students understand how to communicate with and seek out support from the instructor in ways that are otherwise opaque or require knowledge of the hidden curriculum that many students may not possess. The things that made students feel more supported were often things that acknowledge that students often have a lot going on in their lives that they're trying to balance, and that the instructor is there to support students in navigating challenges that arise outside the classroom that may be impacting the way that students engage in the course. Here's just one excerpt from a syllabus that was scored by students as highly supportive. The instructor included this statement on the syllabus: "If you cannot afford the web text, please contact your TA as soon as possible. We will try to connect you with resources that may be available so that these challenges do not affect your performance in the class." One student circled the statement and wrote that this felt very supportive. And then they added, "Textbook expenses are major purchases for many students who may already struggle to get by. A note like this shows that the professor understands and is actively being an ally. It shows the student that there is no shame in asking for this type of help." And so with that, we're going to jump into our panel discussion so we can hear from some of my colleagues who were instrumental in piloting the toolkit and getting this faculty and student feedback. And so Laurel, Sushila, and Tiffany, thanks so very much again for joining us today. And I want to start us off by asking all of you about your experience in working closely with instructors as they've been revising their syllabi, or what your experience was like revising your own syllabus. What are some of the big takeaways from this process, and what are some of the things that are being done differently in the classroom after using this toolkit? And Sushila, I think we're going to start off with you.
Thank you so much, Sam. Usually whenever we do syllabus work with faculty, there are one or two who will raise the question, well, nobody even reads the syllabus anyway, so why are we bothering with all of this work? I have slight issues with that statement, but sort of looking at some of our revised syllabi, I can understand why a student wouldn't necessarily want to spend a lot of time reading these pieces. We as faculty have traditionally used these as contracts of laying out important ground rules that have sometimes been informed by a painful process of learning ourselves about what works and what doesn't. But this approach really gives us an opportunity to change the syllabus from thinking about it as a contract to thinking about it as a way to welcome students in to our course, to our discipline, potentially to the university if we're teaching those gateway courses to freshmen. My own syllabus, so I've always prided myself at valuing the student experience and sort of, really kind of, holding that valuable and paying attention to it. But when I went through this process, I learned a lot reading my syllabus from the eye of a student and finding some pieces in it that missed the mark, that did not provide welcoming opportunities for the students, particularly my section on academic dishonesty. And this had been inherited from a previous colleague and informed by some of my negative experiences with it. And when I read that and thought about being a student reading that on the first day in the class, I realized I had to make some changes. I think that sort of this conscious process has helped instructors understand the difference between intent and impact and realize the importance of clear communication to students about some policies are in place and there are good reasons for those policies to be in place. Students don't always understand the reasons, and given the context, students are much less likely to take this as an exclusionary policy and understand the reasons for it. So it's been very impactful for the instructors that we've worked with in terms of giving them a mindset change in how to think about their class from the lens of the student experience.
Thanks, Sushila. Tiffany, what about you? What has your experience been like working with instructors at Morgan State University?
We've had a great experience working with 10 faculty who signed on to do every single part of what we asked from them. And then we had about an additional 20 to 30 volunteers who wanted to do as much as they could given the other commitments that they had made. So whether it was the 10 faculty or the larger body of faculty, we found that this was such a great exercise in really drilling down into a syllabus that some, as you say, was just said, might think of something irrelevant or that we put on the shelf, but students really check the syllabus, especially when it comes to how they're going to be graded and how to understand what the expectations are of the course. One of the things that our faculty found that even leaving the policies exactly as they are, just the way that we can change and adjust our verbiage and our words and the language and the text makes such a difference. Whether it was instead of just saying, my office hours are Monday, Wednesday, and Friday from 10 to 11. You can say that not even in a complete sentence as a bullet, or you can say, include a statement that's included in the guide that gives us a lot of different language to play around with, that I know how important it is to engage with my students on an individual basis. Therefore, I make myself available to you on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday at these hours. However, if those hours are not convenient for you, I'm willing to schedule an appointment that can work best around your schedule because I want us to have that time together. So, you haven't changed the policy, you haven't changed your office hours, but you've changed the way students can identify with that particular statement. We found the same thing with attendance. You can say, you'll get 3 unexcused absences, and you can say it, very technically, or you can say it in a way where, as your instructor, I truly value your participation in my class, and I know how important it is for you to attend. However, I also understand that, life happens and you may have situations that would take you outside of the classroom, and just the whole tone of the syllabus can be changed from the types of acronyms that we use and the inside baseball, technical approach to something that sounds like these are the rules and you either, conform to my rules or you're not going to make it, to language with that growth mindset that says I believe every student can be successful in my course. And you can use that language to just in every statement, affirm that you believe that students can be successful. So our faculty found it very useful. And then, of course, there's a second phase of it is actually questioning your policies and statements when you go to change them. Like, why am I doing this? Now, who said this is the way? So I think there's the low-hanging fruit of just updating your language to include that sense of belonging, growth mindset framework. But then there's the next level, which I'm sure we're going to talk about it, which is actually thinking about changing and adjusting some of your policies.
Yeah, absolutely, Tiffany. I appreciate that both you and Sushila are sort of talking about this from the adjustment from the syllabus just being something that goes from the instructor to the student to something that really creates a way to communicate about a relationship between the instructor and the student, really as partners in learning together. Laurel, what about you? What has your experience been like, both with your own syllabus and working with other faculty?
Yeah, I would echo much of what Sushila and Tiffany already said. The toolkit made us realize that the syllabus is so much more than the syllabus. The syllabus is a practical, tangible entrance point for faculty to think deeply about equitable course policies and structures and how we best communicate them, as Tiffany talked about. Importantly, it opened up a lot of conversations for our faculty about things that we, as STEM faculty, don't spend a whole lot of time digging into and understanding the research base around it. So we had discussions about belonging, growth mindset, wise feedback, and what those things were, and the fact that there is a whole lot of research to support that these are really important for the student experience and student success. I'll also echo the point that I think Sushila made, that syllabi often get passed down from instructor to instructor to instructor over decades. And this is cultural reproduction. And there are phrases and policies in our syllabi that could have originated 20 or 30 years ago. So by doing this toolkit together, it allowed us to think really deeply about what we want to perpetuate and what we don't. And sometimes reading the syllabi, I was like, where did that come from? And that doesn't sound like anything I would say. And it's not something that I believe. So the toolkit helped us break that cycle of cultural reproduction of things we didn't want to be reproducing. So I'll leave it at that.
Yeah, thank you, Laurel. I think it's always great to be questioning the things that we just do because we inherited them from somebody else. And I think this is a great sort of way to create a new cycle of now potentially passing down these new syllabi as well. I want to pivot to talking a little bit about what the student feedback has been like on some of the revised syllabi, but also maybe just the way that instructors are talking about policies or expectations differently in their course as a result of using the toolkit. So I want to start with Tiffany, since I know at Morgan State there was quite a rigorous process of having students revise the syllabi and highlight them and mark them up. So can you tell us a little bit about what that experience was like?
Sure. For the 10 faculty who signed on and committed to do every part of what we asked, they submitted one original version of their syllabus and a second revised version of their syllabus from having used the toolkit and the syllabus review guide. So there were 20 then syllabi from the 10 faculty members. Then we had 10 student reviewers that we used, and we did give incentives to both students and faculty, by the way. Our incentive for the 10 faculty participants was $350, and the incentive for the student participants was $150. So each of the 10 students, then, we wanted all 20 syllabi to get 3 reviews. So there were going to be 60 reviews that were needed by students. So each of the 10 students had 6 syllabi to review. And what we did is we made sure they only had one version of a particular syllabus. So they couldn't even make a comparison to, oh, this is the new version or something happened. So they had 6 different syllabi from the 10 faculty. And for those of you like a Rubik's Cube problem to solve, this was really fun to arrange this so that all 20 syllabi got 3 reviews and not by the same student for each version. So we came up with, I came up with a nice way to make sure that this happened. And so what I found so fascinating about it, the students had no information to understand that they had, an original version or new version. They just had 6 syllabi to review using this rubric with these instructions. And then when we put that data in aggregate form, I mean, to the letter. All of the 10 syllabi that were the original versions got lower scores across the board than all of the 10 syllabi that were the revised versions. And again, this is by different reviewers and students not seeing versions. And to see how dramatically different the scores were, and it was represented already on the slide that you showed, Samantha. So that across the board, students just responded so much more positively to the revised syllabi. And like I said, in a blind kind of situation where they really had nothing to compare it to. And so when the faculty saw how low their original syllabus score compared to the new one, and they understood kind of the methodology here, they were blown away that students just, you know, organically liked and felt more positively about the new syllabi, and they got tremendously higher marks on the after having used the toolkit.
Great, thank you, Tiffany. And I appreciate you laying out that feedback loop and, you know, really showing that the faculty were appreciating that feedback from the students as well. So Sushila, how about you?
We had so some tangible and some less tangible ways to tell what impact the syllabus work was having on our students. We heard from several students that by looking at the syllabus, by reading the syllabus sort of very early in the semester, they realized that this class was going to be different than some of the other classes that they had taken. The less tangible ways that we had of deciding what impact this had was faculty were reporting students sort of approaching them with more trust and bringing up issues that they hadn't necessarily shared with faculty before at an earlier stage. And so kind of the combination of not just the syllabus, but the first day and first week interventions really seemed to sort of increase the level of trust that students have for faculty. And I feel like that is a really important part of making it a safe space for students to learn, especially challenging, fast-paced material. So yeah, the other piece we had was we had the use of a wonderful survey tool called Copilot Ascend, which enabled us to sort of take the pulse of student experience at various points in the class. And this survey allowed us to sort of find out how students felt about social belonging, about identity safety, about trust and fairness. And students taking the classes which had the implemented syllabus work in first day showed improvements over the semester, you know, from before they had even seen anything about the class to after the first week in several of these areas.
Wonderful, thank you, Sushila. Love the different data points that you're drawing from there. Laurel, what about in your experience?
Sure. One of the things that the toolkit brought home for me is that many students still come into an intro STEM course with the expectation that the instructor sees an intro STEM course as a gatekeeper, and that the instructor doesn't really expect all students to succeed. And I realized that it isn't enough not to have that mindset. You have to really tell students over and over again that you don't have that mindset. So I personally used ideas and sample language from the toolkit to explicitly include the idea that my mindset was that all students could succeed in the course, and I believe that every individual could. And then doing the toolkit also reminded me that I put it in the syllabus, but I also have to say it to students and say it often. And one huge difference I noticed pre-change and post-change in changing my syllabus and in changing the way I explicitly said my mindset about all students being able to succeed is that I started to see like 50% of my students in introductory biology in the course evaluations said things like, I like that this course didn't assume I would fail, or this instructor really wants us to pass. And that just made me think, wow, before that, did they think I wanted them to fail? Even though I never said I did, but I realized I have to say that I don't, that I want them all to succeed and I expect that they can.
Thank you, Laurel. I think that's a really powerful observation about just the need to communicate with students and do it frequently and just constantly, you know, affirm their abilities and affirm that you are there for them as an instructor. I think it's a really important takeaway here. So all of you, of course, have used this toolkit in various ways and have done the syllabus revision. And I know for many of you, that's gone from a sort of small number of early adopters, and now it's growing and moving in different ways throughout the campus. So can you all talk a little bit about how you're broadening the use of these recommendations on your campus and really institutionalizing this focus on growth mindset and belonging? And Tiffany, can we start with you?
Sure. This was so well timed for a number of reasons with the work that we did in the cohort compared to what we were doing at the university. We are adopting a technology, a tool as a syllabus, a template for our syllabi, simple syllabus. And what we're going to do is build in some of the language and statements into the template so that it would be consistent across all syllabi. So there's a way that you can have a statement about equity, diversity, and inclusion with the university, how we value every person. That will be a part of the template. There's a way that we're going to use the language for disability support, about how students can register with the Office of Disability Support and what our policy is, and use that language specifically. So there are about 4 different places in the template that we're going to use that growth mindset, sense of belonging language. So it won't be something that the faculty even have to think about on an individual basis. So that's coming. The adoption got pushed back because of COVID, but we're still on track to use that template. Another thing that we have been able to do is to share our work at our faculty institutes that are required for all instructors twice a year. I've made an individual presentation about the work that we're doing, and then the faculty actually led their own session about the work that they've done with growth mindset and sense of belonging. And then our Center for Excellence in Teaching and Learning actually offered a workshop series after, so that people who were more interested in the work could participate in one of the workshop series. So we've really tried to have a snowball of enthusiasm and momentum to not just keep it with the 10 faculty or the volunteers, but to use the language across the board in the template and then share the information with faculty through our center and also through the faculty institutes.
Great, thank you, Tiffany. Laurel, I think that you've been working on some similar things at CU Denver.
So Tiffany used the other day this idea, and I think maybe today too, that the toolkit has a really high return on investment. And once you find something so good, we try to think, how can we maximize its use and share it as much as we possibly can? One thing, CU Denver uses peer evaluation of teaching for annual reviews, which I think a lot of universities do. And we use this toolkit as part of that process now. So if you review a peer's teaching, you can say things like, hey, let me take a look at your syllabus and I'll use this toolkit, a checklist on it. We could talk about it. So that's been really valuable. The biology department faculty who teach the introductory biology course, we created a standard inclusive syllabus toolkit for us all to use as a way of opening a conversation for us to talk about our course policies and what we're doing in a course. And honestly, like sharing really good ideas. I got some great ideas of inclusive languages and some examples from some of my peers, my colleagues. We've also integrated the toolkit into what we call our Inclusive Pedagogy Academy, which is a 6-week, 2.5-hour course for faculty to really talk about and dig into inclusive classroom practices. So this having this resource is a really useful thing for that Inclusive Pedagogy Academy. Our goal is for all faculty at CU Denver to have the opportunity to do that Inclusive Pedagogy Academy.
Thank you, Laurel. It's wonderful to hear that both you and Tiffany have both been finding ways both to kind of systematize this language into templates and other things like that to make it really low lift for faculty to use this language, and that there are also have been ways for faculty just to really be champions of the work with other instructors and to kind of spread the word about how valuable this kind of approach can be. So Shella, what about how you're broadening participation in this at the University of New Mexico?
So yeah, very similar. So faculty tend to get very enthusiastic and excited about the work and sort of often start with the low lift pieces, but then end up wanting to share this work with their departments, with their schools, with their colleges. And so we're sort of seeing a lot of like starting of small fires. Our faculty are just very excited about sharing the work. At UNM, faculty are sort of sharing not only with other faculty, but we're kind of reaching into the advisement realm, thinking about how sort of these kinds of messages can be reinforced by our advisors as well. And also really sort of it's catalyzing thinking about the student voice and student leadership in a variety of different roles at the university, both in terms of sort of like a peer mentor tutor type role within these big STEM classes, but also sort of, you know, recatalyzing student organizations in departments and sort of valuing, honoring, and listening to that student voice.
That's wonderful, Sushila. I think that's a really poignant point to really ensure that, you know, if we're trying to better serve students and better improve their experiences, that it's really critical to have them at the table as part of that process, and that they're really experts in their own experience and that they really have a lot to contribute to this process. So thank you so much for sharing that. My next question for you all, I'd love to talk a little bit about how focusing on student belonging and instructor growth mindset is advancing equity at your institution. So how are you seeing this kind of shape some of the conversations around diversity and equity and inclusion? And Laurel, can we start with you?
Sure. Yeah, it was interesting looking at our syllabi and seeing the non-inclusive examples of the syllabus that the toolkit has was like looking in a mirror for us and really not liking all the time what we saw. So even people who thought they were inclusive saw room for improvement, and not only saw the room for improvement, but saw how to improve, which is really an example of wise feedback. So we know something's not right, and the toolkit gives us a way to make it better and make it right. And talking as a group of educators about belonging was an opportunity for us all to learn from each other's experiences and perspective. And faculty may not have all had issues with sense of belonging, or at least they didn't always have the same issues. But by talking about it, they realized the diversity of issues and perspectives that people have. And they understood better that not everybody experiences a class the same way that they did. And students don't all experience it the same way either. And that helped them take steps to address things in ways that would support students. I think finally, our putting growth mindset into the syllabus more made us all have conversations about growth mindset and use growth mindset both for our students and for ourselves. And we had really graceful conversations of, look what I did, how do I fix this? And get advice from colleagues, and really having a support network among faculty too, to change in a positive way that affects students positively.
That's great, Laurel. Thanks so much for talking about really the role that instructors have in terms of creating that supportive environment for one another, and really kind of having a collective growth mindset about doing this work, you know, and being able to expand our abilities to address diversity, equity, and inclusion altogether. Tiffany, what has your experience like this been at Morgan State University?
Well, we find ourselves always in a different and unique position as an historically Black institution, where still more than 80% of our students are Black or African-American students, and more than about 64% of our faculty are also Black or African-American. And so a lot of times it can be tempting to feel like we've done it. You know, my faculty member looks like me, check the box, you know, and think that the work is done just because there's a Black student and a Black instructor. But what this work really showed us is just because we might have the same race or ethnicity in common doesn't mean that the language that I'm using makes you feel any more supported, capable, or that we are affirming that you're capable of doing the work in the class and being successful. Laurel said earlier, you know, there's already a stigma in certain STEM courses, whether it's math or biology or chemistry, that there's a high DFW rate. And, you know, whether or not you're an HBCU or whatever your institution type is, doesn't give you an advantage in this area when students already come to our classrooms with math anxiety or fears about certain subjects where they haven't perhaps been as successful in K through 12. And so doing this work really helped our faculty. Like I said, not all who participated in we had a very diverse group in our 10 were Black faculty, but all of our faculty had that time to do an introspection to say, you know, the language I'm using is really not empowering, it's not affirming, it's not positive. It doesn't convey that there's the growth mindset that this work can be mastered, you can reach these competencies. So for us, the equity space is a space where many times when it's based on numbers and ratios and identity, we feel like we've got it all made. But when you peel back the onion and look at the next layer, there's still so much work for us to do, even at an HBCU. And that was very important for us to see that there's this opportunity for us to get this work done and really have our students come into our classrooms feeling supported and affirmed and empowered.
Thanks so much, Tiffany. That, again, it's a really poignant point and observation that you're sharing with us all. And really that just all students want to know that they have the potential to succeed, and all of them want to be reassured that, you know, that kind of challenge is normal and that the instructor is there to support them. And that's really broadly applicable across all contexts. So thanks so much for sharing that. Sushila, what about you at the University of New Mexico?
What Tiffany said just really resonated with me, because I think at the very early days, the first one of these surveys that I gave to my students revealed that my women had a much lower self-efficacy in science than my men. And I was, you know, sort of somehow thought that just being a woman in STEM and a minority woman in STEM, that kind of standing up and doing it would be enough. And, you know, I think that really sort of helped me connect to an insight, you know, which a lot of faculty have as well, which is being inclusive requires active thinking and intentional action. And if you're not doing that, you're really not being inclusive, right? You have to be looking at everything with an eye for equity. And otherwise you're going to miss a lot of unintended messages and a lot of opportunities to improve, right? And so, you know, you might think that students are receiving something, but if you really want to make sure they receive it, you have to spell it out and you have to say it often. Going back to something that Laurel said, you know, reinforcing this messaging of belonging, of growth mindset throughout the semester until you feel like a bit of a broken record, right? And then you're kind of wondering on your student evaluations, are they going to be like, was she too much? But the student evaluations give nothing but, we felt supported, right? We had hard times, this helped us persist through. Right. And so, you know, really that has enforced for me and for the faculty at UNM the importance of being intentional, being vulnerable, being open to learning, and being in community to try to make some much needed changes.
Yeah, thank you so much, Sushila. I think that your point about really being intentional is spot on, and that, you know, that really does take some active effort, and that it's great that you all have these groups of faculty that you've been working with to really think through that intentionality together and to come up with ways that feels authentic to the individual instructor to intentionally do that in their own classroom, because of course everybody is different, right? And so being able to adapt this in different ways is really important. So moving on to our next question, what is one piece of advice that you would share with other institutions who are looking to engage faculty with this process? And Sushila, why don't we start with you this time?
Yeah, so one of the things that we found was this work was very powerful at catalyzing connections between faculty, and that it was very motivating for faculty to be able to come together in groups of their own discipline, but also in interdisciplinary groups to engage in this work with other faculty who had experience with our specific student population, experience in their discipline, and who were thoughtful and creative. And so if there's any way, if you're thinking about doing this kind of syllabus work, the First Day Toolkit with your faculty, find ways of encouraging that community, of giving faculty the time to partner up, be in small groups, maybe follow up with each other to brainstorm. This is going to be very motivating for the faculty and is going to result in a higher quality of the efforts because of that sort of productive sharing of ideas. So the faculty community piece has been really big for us at UNM, and the more we can do that, the more effective this work will be.
Great, thank you, Sushila. Laurel, what about you?
So one piece of advice is that the syllabus toolkit seems to be one of the best places I've ever seen to start with for faculty who want to be more inclusive, because it's both accessible and it opens doors to other things they could learn about and do. One thing that we learned was that timing can matter in terms of how faculty engage in the process. We had a great experience doing the toolkit in May when the semester had wound down and faculty were in a good space. They were happy the grades were submitted, but like it wasn't time for summer camp to start or whatever it was. So they were in a good space to be really reflective about the process and enjoy each other's company. And then the faculty asked us, hey, will you remind us about those materials in August? Will you put them on our faculty page? Because we want to look at them again when we're actually sitting down and doing those revisions. But they had a couple of months to really percolate and think about it and explore more. And then they made those changes. So timing mattered. And the syllabus toolkit is a really great place to start.
Yeah, that's really helpful. And that reminds me of what Sushila was just saying a few minutes ago about the intentionality as well. And really just having that time carved out to really be able to be in that reflective mindset and think it through is, I'm sure, key to really just being able to be intentional about that process as well. And then Tiffany, what about you? What kind of advice would you provide?
I would provide the advice that this is just so easy to do. When you think about all the projects that we undertake that require money, that require technology, that require more people, this is something the toolkit is so thorough and so self-explanatory. Faculty can work on this. It's a low-hanging fruit type of proposition. You might spend 90 minutes if you're very thorough, but you could actually spend 45 minutes or an hour applying the syllabus guide to your syllabus, changing your language, not even necessarily changing a policy, but just stating and your policies in a way that builds efficacy and that makes students feel included. You could invest literally less than an hour. And as we've said earlier, this syllabus could be passed down for generations. So, you know, the return on investment, the ROI is going to be high. You're talking about spending 45 minutes to 90 minutes on something that may change the destiny of a course at your institution forever. It may forever be changed because one faculty member took the time to follow this guide and this rubric. So I would say, why not do it? I understand the tool is going to be made available again at no cost. You don't have to join. You don't have to be a part of a cohort. I'm certainly going to be reintroducing it to our faculty at large to make sure that we get the most out of it at Morgan State University as well. So I would just say, why not? It's low-hanging fruit. You won't regret it. The students are going to respond to it well, and it could change the course trajectory forever.
Wonderful, Tiffany. And yes, we are going to share a link to the toolkit very shortly, and it's certainly designed to be utilized as often as it needs to be. And it's very simple for faculty to sign up, and they can do it on their own, or you can do it in a context where faculty are also coming together to do that revision as a group. But speaking of cohorts, I do just want to ask one final question of you all. And since, you know, all of your institutions, whether they're part of the Student Experience Project cohort or the Peer Learning Network, have also been meeting with other people in positions like yours throughout this process to really talk about, you know, how it's transforming the way that your instructors are utilizing syllabi in the classroom. And so, I was just hoping that you could share some perspectives from what that process has really been like to just be meeting with your peers at other institutions. And are there any key learnings from that process that you'd want to draw out and share with everyone today?
I would just say that I always love working with colleagues at other institutions because you realize how similar we are across the board. The same types of language. You would think all the biology faculty in the country got together and wrote a common syllabus and shared it out at all of our institutions. That's how common the language is about certain things, whether, like I said, it's an attendance policy or academic integrity or, office hours. So, because we have so much in common, it means that we can work together to move ourselves forward so easily because there's so many commonalities that we have the same types of challenges so that the same types of solutions can really work across a diverse set of institutions and types. So just kind of comparing notes and commiserating, if you will, and encouraging each other that, like I said, our faculty aren't the only ones who still use this particular policy or still say it this way. And then to see that faculty at other institutions are making progress and making changes is very encouraging and uplifting. So I always love seeing how other colleagues are moving forward and working with them together.
Sam, it's interesting. I think one of the biggest pieces that was maybe a surprise to us when we were doing this work was how faculty sort of felt that they'd secretly wanted to have a human syllabus all along. And some of them had sort of snuck in little bits of humanity with maybe a little bit of guilt as to, we're not kind of upholding the disciplinary requirements here. And for faculty to see that other faculty, not only at UNM, but all over the country in a nationally established project were sort of promoting this and were giving evidence as to, this being a powerful way of reducing equity gaps in your class and supporting all of your students to succeed. That gave faculty a lot of confidence in sort of their instincts and sort of, permission to be human in terms of their syllabus, with the backing that this resulted in improved outcomes for the students. So we have really enjoyed the interactions across the institutions. We've had a particular example. We, in outreach to the various different departments and colleges in our school, we were able to collaborate with a faculty member, a female minority faculty member from the University of Toledo in engineering, who joined a presentation on these techniques to our Department of Engineering, and to hear from a fellow engineer about the impact of these in her class was hugely impactful. She was chair of an engineering department as well, so she sort of carried the weight of the position as well. And so it's really felt like kind of an extended network of expertise, of different creative ideas. It's been wonderful to see what other faculty have sort of come up with as a result of the work, like unique creative assignments, ways of messaging to students. The list goes on. And we have these resources sort of, sort of both kind of contained for future use, but also the human resources of colleagues and friends to engage with in this important work.
I would agree that having across institution collaboration was super impactful. And one of the things that I learned in the SEP, and that we often say, the struggle is real, the struggle is shared. And we tell this to our students too. As Tiffany said, yeah, like we saw some of our common struggles. And as Drusilla said, there were really unique perspectives on those struggles and how people were trying to tackle them. So I feel like we were able to efficiently disseminate information across institutions and to try things out in different contexts and share what worked and share what didn't, making us get better faster.
That's great. Thank you to all three of you so much for sharing that. We do have one question that I think we'll just take a brief moment to respond to. We have one question. Do you get any pushback from faculty? And so, Sushila, do you want to speak a little bit to that? I think you were alluding to it a little bit in terms of, you know, faculty maybe saying, oh, nobody reads the syllabus, but what else do you have to share in response to this question?
That's interesting. I think, you know, I would say the way we have managed the project is kind of on an opt-in, that we're probably getting a lot of the faculty who are kind of receptive to these ideas in the first place. But, you know, as we all know, faculty are famously independent-minded, and they have fierce control over their courses and how they do these pieces. So we've actually got less pushback than I would have imagined given that. And I think part of it is really empowering faculty to sort of, you know, here's the data, this is what works, this is what, you know, this is why it works. These are impressive studies and there's a huge body of it, right? And then here's a toolkit of options for you to do. And you don't have to do anything that's inauthentic to how you are as a teacher, right? You don't have to share a story of a struggle that you had in college if you really didn't feel like you struggled, or if you don't feel like sharing that, right? But there are many ways, there are many different options sort of being more inclusive in your language, of being more welcoming, of being more clear about your expectations and the reasons for the structure. And so I would say less pushback than you know, than I imagined. Faculty are always interested in engaging and kind of, you know, interrogating the process and thinking about what works and what doesn't. But in my experience, that has led to better, more authentic interpretations in their own classes.
Thanks, Sushila. I appreciate you responding to that. And seeing no other questions in the Q&A, I just want to say thank you again to Sushila, Laurel, and Tiffany for sharing your really powerful reflections and perspectives with everybody here on the call today. And I'm tremendously grateful to have had the opportunity to collaborate with all of you as part of the process, and really glad that you were able to come and speak to those experiences today to our audience. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen again, and the First Day Toolkit is now officially available at studentexperienceproject.org/firstdaytoolkit. It is, as we said, completely free and available to use to you and everybody at your institution. And we really hope that you'll use these resources to improve course syllabi so that students are on the first day of class able to receive messages that affirm that they can succeed in the course. If you have any questions about components of the toolkit, please feel free to reach out to me. My email address is up here on the slide, but I'm also putting it here in the chat as well. I also want to thank the College Transition Collaborative, as well as all of our partners in the Peer Learning Network and the Student Experience Project, who are part of developing this toolkit. And also, the Student Experience Project will be releasing more tools like the First Day Toolkit in July. And so we encourage you to sign up for our mailing list to be the first to know about these new tools when they come available. And I am going to put the link in the chat to sign up for that newsletter. And the session, as you can probably see, has been recorded. It should go out via email to everyone who has registered for this session, and it will also be on our website at studentexperienceproject.org sometime next week. And as we close, I just want to say thank you all again so much for joining us today for this webinar, and we hope you have a wonderful rest of your day. Thank you all.